H.N. Rousseau woke to absolute silence, the kind of silence that meant danger in the wilderness of colonial New York. No birds singing their morning songs, no small animals rustling through the underbrush, nothing but the heavy quiet that came when predators were near. He lay perfectly still in his rough bed, his hand moving slowly toward the knife he kept beneath his pillow, listening with every fiber of his being. Then he heard it, the barely perceptible creak of leather against wood, the whisper of cloth moving in still air, the controlled breathing of many men trying to remain undetected. H.N.'s eyes opened fully, and his blood turned to ice. Through the gaps in his cabin's log walls, he could see shapes, dozens of them, warriors painted for war forming a complete circle around his home. He had perhaps minutes to live, and he knew with terrible certainty that this was because of the Mohawk woman he had helped yesterday, because of the rifle he had given her, because he had chosen compassion over the survival instinct that had kept him alive for 10 years in this brutal frontier. If stories about honor, cultural collision, and the choices that define our humanity move you, subscribe now, because this journey across forbidden boundaries will challenge everything you think you know about loyalty and survival. 24 hours earlier, H.N. had been checking his trap lines in the dense forest 15 miles from his cabin, the morning mist still clinging to the ground. At 32 years old, he had spent a decade living between worlds, a French-Canadian who traded with the British, the French, and various indigenous nations, carefully maintaining neutrality that allowed him to survive while empires clashed around him. He spoke passable Mohawk, adequate English, and native French. He knew the forest better than most men knew their own homes, and he had learned that the key to survival was avoiding all conflicts that weren't directly about staying alive. That philosophy died the moment he heard the gunshot echoing through the trees, followed by crashing movement and labored breathing. H.N. froze, his trapper's instincts screaming at him to hide, to let whatever drama was unfolding pass him by. But curiosity and something deeper, something he didn't want to examine, made him move toward the sounds instead of away. He found her collapsed against a massive oak tree, her buckskin clothing soaked with blood from a wound in her shoulder. She was young, perhaps 20 summers, with the strong features and bearing of Mohawk nobility. Her dark eyes found his face with a mixture of fear and defiant pride. She held a tomahawk in her uninjured hand, ready to fight despite her obvious weakness. H.N. raised his hand slowly, speaking in Mohawk. "I mean no harm. You are injured. Let me help." The woman's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "You are French," she said, her voice strained with pain. "The French ally with the Huron against my people." "I ally with no one," H.N. replied carefully. "I am a trapper. I live alone. The wars of empires are not my concern." "Then leave me," the woman said. "This is not your affair." Before H.N. could respond, he heard voices in the distance, English voices, colonial militia by the sound of them. They were tracking her, and they were getting closer. The woman heard them too, and H.N. saw fear flash across her face before pride masked it again. She tried to stand, gasped with pain, and collapsed back against a tree. H.N. made a decision that went against every survival instinct he possessed. He knelt beside her and examined the wound quickly. The musket ball had passed through her shoulder, missing bone but causing significant bleeding. She needed medical attention, but more immediately, she needed to escape her pursuers. "Can you walk?" he asked. The woman nodded, though H.N. could see it was bravado. He helped her to her feet, supporting her weight. The voices were getting closer, perhaps only minutes away now. H.N. looked around frantically, calculating odds and options. Then he did something that shocked even himself. He unslung his rifle from his shoulder, his only firearm, the weapon that meant the difference between eating and starving, between defending himself and dying helpless. "Take this," he said, pressing the rifle into her hands. "Follow the creek north for 2 miles, then west until you reach the rock formation that looks like a bear. There's a cave beneath it. Hide there until nightfall, then continue north. Your people's lands are a day's travel from there." The woman stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "You know nothing of me. I could be your enemy. You are wounded and pursued by men who would likely kill you," H.N. said simply. "That makes you someone who needs help. Nothing else matters." He pressed powder and shot into her hands as well, everything he had on him. "Now go," he urged. Quickly, the woman looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable in her dark eyes. "My name is Kanwatsitsayeni," she said. "I will remember this." Then she disappeared into the forest with a silence that would have been impressive even for someone uninjured. Etienne listened to the militia getting closer and made himself scarce in a different direction, hoping they would lose the trail. Now, standing in his cabin with 70 warriors outside, Etienne understood that his act of compassion had brought consequences he hadn't fully anticipated. He rose slowly from his bed, making no sudden movements, and pulled on his buckskin shirt. His mind raced through options. Running was impossible. They had him completely surrounded. Fighting was suicide. He had given away his only rifle, and his musket was unloaded, leaning uselessly in the corner. His only choice was to face whatever judgment awaited him with as much dignity as he could muster. Etienne opened his cabin door slowly and stepped out into the pale dawn light. The sight that greeted him was both terrifying and magnificent. 70 Mohawk warriors stood in a perfect circle around his cabin, each one painted and armed, their faces expressionless. At the center of the group stood an older man, perhaps 50 summers, with the bearing and decorations of a war chief. His face was stern and weathered, marked with the scars of many battles. And beside him, her shoulder freshly bandaged, stood Kanwatsitsayeni. The war chief studied Etienne for a long moment, his dark eyes revealing nothing. Then he spoke in Mohawk, his voice deep and commanding. "I am Thandinija, war chief of the Wolf Clan. This woman is my daughter. She tells me you gave her your only weapon and helped her escape the British soldiers who pursued her." Etienne's heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady. "What she says is true," he replied in Mohawk. "She was injured and needed help. I did what any person of honor would do." Thandinija's expression remained unreadable. "The British are our enemies," he said. "They push into our lands, break treaties, kill our people. Yet you, a white man, help my daughter escape them. Why?" Etienne chose his words carefully. "I am not British," he said. "I am French-Canadian, a trapper who lives alone. The wars between empires are not my concern. I saw a person in need of help. Her nation or mine did not matter in that moment. And you gave her your rifle," Thandinija continued. "A man's rifle in this wilderness is his life. Without it, you cannot hunt properly, cannot defend yourself. Yet you gave it to a stranger, to someone whose people you had no reason to trust. It was the right thing to do," Etienne said simply. A murmur ran through the assembled warriors. Thandinija raised his hand, and silence fell immediately. He stepped forward until he stood directly in front of Etienne, so close that Etienne could see the flecks of gray in the war chief's hair. The older man's eyes searched Etienne's face, looking for deception, for weakness, for whatever truth lay beneath. "My daughter tells me something else," Thandinija said quietly. "She tells me that the British soldiers who pursued her were led by a colonial officer named Captain Aldridge. She tells me this officer seeks to find and destroy a Mohawk village to the north, using information given to him by a traitor among our people. She was carrying this warning to her brother, who leads the warriors defending that village, when the British discovered and shot her." Etienne felt cold understanding wash over him. Kanwatsitsayeni hadn't just been a wounded traveler. She had been carrying intelligence that could save lives, prevent a massacre, and by helping her, he had inadvertently involved himself in the very conflicts he had spent years avoiding. "I did not know this," Etienne said honestly. "I only knew she needed help." "Ignorance does not change consequences," Thandinija replied. "By helping my daughter, you have made an enemy of the British. Captain Aldridge knows someone aided her escape. He will search for that person. And when he finds you, and he will find you, he will consider you a traitor to the colonial cause." Etienne felt his carefully maintained neutrality crumbling around him. "I have traded with the British for years," he said. "Surely if I explain, you gave a wounded Mohawk woman your rifle during wartime," Thandinija interrupted. "There is no explanation that will satisfy them. In their eyes, your chosen side." The older man paused, then continued. "The question now is whether you have truly chosen that side, or whether you simply made a decision you did not fully understand." Etienne looked at Kanwatsitsayeni. She met his gaze directly, her face showing both gratitude and something that might have been apology. He thought about the choice he had made yesterday, about how natural it felt in the moment, how inevitable. He thought about the years he had spent pretending that neutrality was possible, that he could live in this land without acknowledging the injustices happening all around him. I chose to help someone who needed it. Etienne said, finally, if that makes me an enemy of the British, then I accept that consequence. But I am not a warrior. I know nothing of your wars or strategies. Thandonija nodded slowly. That, at least, I believe, he said. But my daughter's warning must still reach her brother. The British planned their attack for 3 days from now. Without warning, the village will be destroyed, women and children killed. He met Etienne's eyes directly. You know the British, know their language and their ways better than most of my warriors. You could travel through their territory without immediately raising suspicion. Will you help us deliver this warning? Etienne felt the weight of the request. Agreeing would mean fully abandoning his neutrality, becoming an active participant in the conflict. Refusing would mean potentially condemning innocent people to death. He looked around at the 70 warriors surrounding him, understanding that his answer would also determine whether he left this clearing alive. But that wasn't what decided him. What decided him was remembering Konwatsitieni's face when he had given her his rifle, the gratitude and surprise at finding compassion from an unexpected source. What decided him was the knowledge that neutrality in the face of injustice was itself a choice, and not an honorable one. I will help, Etienne said. Thandonija's stern face softened almost imperceptibly. Then you will travel with my daughter and 2 of my warriors. They will guide you through Mohawk territory. You will use your knowledge of the British to help them reach the village safely. He paused. And if you succeed, if my people are saved because of your help, then you will have earned something rare for a white man. You will have earned the trust of the Mohawk people. Within an hour, Etienne found himself traveling north through dense forest alongside Konwatsitieni and 2 Mohawk warriors named Otishieni and Sahanwati. The warriors moved with silent efficiency, their painted faces alert for any sign of danger. Etienne did his best to match their pace, though he was acutely aware that his woodcraft, impressive by European standards, was clumsy compared to theirs. Konwatsitieni, despite her injury, moved with determination. She had changed into fresh clothing, her wounded shoulder bound tightly beneath her buckskin shirt. She carried Etienne's rifle, the one he had given her, and he noticed she handled it with practiced familiarity. During a brief rest, she approached him while the 2 warriors scouted ahead. You did not have to agree to this, she said in Mohawk. My father would have let you leave in peace. You had already done enough by helping me. Etienne drank from his water skin before responding. Once I gave you that rifle, my neutrality was already gone, he said. Your father was right about that. The British will consider me a traitor regardless. I might as well do something worthwhile with my new status. Konwatsitieni studied him with the same intense gaze her father had used. You are not like other white men I have met, she observed. Most would not risk themselves for people they do not know. I could say the same about your people, Etienne replied. Most would kill a white man found alone in the forest, especially during wartime. Yet your father offered me a chance to prove myself. My father is a wise leader, Konwatsitieni said with pride. He knows that honor can exist in unexpected places. She paused, then added more quietly. And I told him that your eyes showed no hatred when you looked at me, only concern. That mattered to him. Before Etienne could respond, Otishieni returned with urgent news. British patrol ahead, he said tersely. 20 soldiers, moving east along the river trail. We must go around. They changed direction, moving deeper into the forest. As they traveled, Konwatsitieni explained more about the situation. The village they were trying to reach was led by her older brother, Adiranta, a respected war leader who commanded the loyalty of 3 clans. Captain Aldridge had been trying to destroy this village for months, seeing it as a strategic threat to British expansion. The trader who had provided information was a Mohawk man named Otkin, who had been promised land and protection by the British in exchange for betraying his own people. How do you know all this? Etienne asked as they navigated a steep ravine. Because Akin tried to recruit me first, Kunwatsitsayeni said bitterly. He believed I would be sympathetic, because I had spent time among the British, learning their language and customs, so I could serve as a translator for my father. When I refused and threatened to expose him, he went to the British and told them I was a spy. That is why they were hunting me when you found me. The pieces of the larger picture were forming in Etienne's mind. This wasn't just about one village or one battle. This was about the larger conflict consuming the entire frontier, where indigenous nations were being systematically destroyed by European powers fighting for control of the continent. His years of pretending he could stay above these conflicts suddenly seemed not just naive, but cowardly. They traveled for 2 days, moving carefully through territory that grew increasingly dangerous. On the evening of the second day, they encountered a grim discovery, a burned homestead, recent enough that smoke still rose from the ruins. Bodies lay scattered around the clearing. A French-Canadian family, by the look of their possessions. Women, children, elderly, none had been spared. British did this. Sanwadi said, examining the scene with professional detachment, trying to clear the frontier of anyone who might aid the French or the Mohawk. Etienne felt sick. He had known that atrocities were happening, had heard stories, but seeing the evidence firsthand was different. A child's doll lay in the mud near one of the bodies, and something inside Etienne hardened. These were his people, French-Canadians like himself, killed simply for existing in a place that empires wanted claim. That night, as they camped in a hidden hollow, Kunwatsitsayeni sat beside Etienne, while the two warriors kept watch. I am sorry you had to see that, she said quietly. War makes monsters of men who might otherwise be decent. Your father asked me why I helped you, Etienne said, staring into the small fire. I told him it was the right thing to do, but the truth is more complicated. I have spent 10 years pretending I could live in this land without taking sides, without acknowledging the violence and injustice happening all around me. I told myself that staying neutral made me wise, made me safe, but it just made me a coward. You are not a coward, Kunwatsitsayeni said firmly. A coward would not have helped a stranger. A coward would not have given away his only weapon. A coward would not be traveling with us now, risking his life to save people he does not know. Maybe, Etienne said, or maybe I am just finally doing what I should have done years ago, choosing a side based on what is right rather than what is safe. They reached the outskirts of the Mohawk village on the morning of the third day. The settlement was larger than Etienne had expected, perhaps 200 people, with long houses arranged in careful order and fields of corn surrounding the central area. Children played while women worked and men prepared weapons. They had no idea that a British force was approaching with plans to destroy everything they had built. Adiranta, Kunwatsitsayeni's brother, was a younger version of their father, tall and commanding with the same penetrating gaze. He listened to his sister's report with increasing concern, then turned his attention to Etienne. My father sent word about you, he said in accented French. The white trapper who gave his rifle to my sister. You have chosen a dangerous path. It seems to be the only honorable one available, Etienne replied. Adiranta almost smiled. Honor is a luxury during wartime. He observed, but I'm glad to see some still value it. He gestured to the village around them. These people are my responsibility. If what you say is true, if the British plan to attack at dawn tomorrow, then I must prepare our defense. Your knowledge of British tactics would be valuable. Will you help us plan? Etienne spent the rest of that day working with Adiranta and the War Council, sharing everything he knew about British military tactics. He explained how colonial militia typically attacked indigenous villages, their formations, their weaknesses, their tendency to underestimate their opponents. The Mohawk leaders listened carefully, asking sharp questions, adapting his information to their own superior knowledge of the terrain. As evening approached, Adiranta pulled Etienne aside. You have given us valuable intelligence, he said, but I must ask you a difficult question. When the British attack tomorrow, will you fight beside us, or will you leave before the battle begins? I would not blame you for choosing to leave. This is not your fight by birth or obligation. Etienne had been wrestling with this question all day. Fighting against British forces would make him a permanent enemy of the colonial powers, without any possibility of returning to his old life. But he had already crossed that bridge when he gave Kanwatsitsayeni his rifle. And more importantly, he had seen the burned homestead, had seen what these soldiers were capable of when unopposed. "I will fight," Etienne said. "If you will have me." Adiranta clasped his shoulder firmly. "Then you fight as one of us," he said. "And if we survive this battle, you will always have a place among the Mohawk people." That night, the village prepared for war. Warriors painted themselves and checked weapons. Women and children were moved to a hidden location deeper in the forest, a contingency plan in case the defenses failed. Etienne was given a tomahawk and shown how to use it properly by Otishiani, who seemed to take grim pleasure in teaching a white man indigenous fighting techniques. Kanwatsitsayeni found Etienne as he sat sharpening the tomahawk, trying to calm his racing thoughts. Her shoulder was still bandaged, but she moved with determination. "I have argued with my brother," she said. "He wants me to go with the women and children to safety. But I am a warrior's daughter. I will not hide while my people fight." "Your wound," Etienne said with concern. "You are not fully healed." "I can still shoot," Kanwatsitsayeni replied, hefting the rifle he had given her. "And I have a debt to repay. You gave me this weapon when you needed it most. Tomorrow, I will use it to defend my people and the man who showed me that not all white men are enemies." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, watching the village make its final preparations. Then Kanwatsitsayeni spoke again, her voice softer. "If we survive tomorrow," she said, "what will you do? You cannot return to your old life. The British will hunt you as a traitor." "I have been thinking about that," Etienne admitted. "I suppose I will have to build a new life, perhaps among your people, if they will accept me, perhaps somewhere else entirely. I have survived alone before. I can do it again." "You do not have to be alone," Kanwatsitsayeni said, meeting his eyes directly. "My father respects you. My brother values your knowledge. And she paused, searching for words. "I find myself grateful that you are here, despite the danger. You could have remained neutral, could have stayed safe in your cabin, but you chose to stand with us instead." Etienne felt warmth spread through his chest at her words. "Standing with you feels more right than 10 years of neutrality ever did," he said, quietly. The British attack came just before dawn, exactly as predicted. Captain Aldridge led 40 soldiers in a coordinated assault, expecting to find sleeping villagers unprepared for battle. Instead, they found Mohawk warriors in carefully prepared positions, led by men who had been warned and given time to plan. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Etienne fought with a desperation he had never experienced, the tomahawk feeling foreign in his hands, but effective nonetheless. He saw Otishiani take down 3 soldiers with brutal efficiency. He saw Adiranta leading warriors in a flanking maneuver that broke the British formation. And he saw Kanwatsitsayeni perched in a tree, using his rifle to deadly effect against soldiers who never saw her coming. The fight lasted perhaps 20 minutes, though it felt like hours. When it ended, the British force was shattered. Captain Aldridge lay dead, along with more than half his men. The survivors fled in disarray, pursued by Mohawk warriors who showed no mercy to invaders who had come to slaughter their families. Etienne sat on the ground afterward, his hands shaking with released adrenaline, trying to process what he had just experienced. Kanwatsitsayeni appeared beside him, her face streaked with powder smoke, his rifle still in her hands. "You fought well," she said, "for someone who claimed to know nothing of warfare." "I am just glad to be alive," Etienne replied honestly. Over the following weeks, Etienne's life transformed completely. He could never return to his old cabin or his old life. The British had indeed marked him as a traitor, with a price on his head that made solitude impossible. Instead, he found himself welcomed into the Mohawk community, given a place to live, taught skills and customs he had never imagined learning. Thandonija visited the village and spoke with Etienne at length. "You have proven yourself," the war chief said, "not just in battle, but in the choices you made before battle was necessary. You saw a person in need and helped without calculating profit or advantage. You chose honor over safety. These are the qualities my people value above all others." "What happens now?" Etienne asked. "The British will not forget what happened here. They will send more soldiers, plan new attacks. Thandonija agreed. The war between our peoples is far from over, but you have shown that not all white men are our enemies, that honor can cross the boundaries that empires try to create. That matters more than you may realize. It gives hope that perhaps, someday, there can be peace built on mutual respect rather than conquest. As autumn turned to winter, Etienne found himself becoming part of community in ways he had never been part of any community before. He contributed his knowledge of European tactics to the village's defense planning. He helped with hunting and trapping, teaching some techniques while learning others. And gradually, carefully, he built a relationship with Kanwatsitsayeni that went beyond gratitude and grew into something deeper. On a cold winter evening, as they sat together watching snowfall outside the longhouse, Kanwatsitsayeni spoke about the future. "My people are facing difficult times," she said. "The British grow stronger, pushed further into our lands. Many believe we will eventually be defeated, our way of life destroyed. Do you believe that?" Etienne asked. Kanwatsitsayeni was quiet for a long moment. "I believe that the world is changing," she said finally. "I believe that the old ways may not survive in their current form. But I also believe that what matters most is how we face these changes. Whether we maintain our honor and humanity, even when everything else is taken from us." Etienne took her hand gently. "Whatever happens," he said, "I will face it beside you. I gave up my old life the moment I gave you that rifle. I do not regret that choice." "Nor do I," Kanwatsitsayeni replied, leaning against his shoulder. Years later, when Etienne was an old man, he would tell his children and grandchildren about the day he gave away his rifle to a bleeding stranger and found himself surrounded by 70 warriors at dawn. He would tell them about the choice between safety and honor, about the discovery that neutrality in the face of injustice was itself a form of betrayal. He would tell them about finding home not in a place but in a people, about learning that family could be built across the boundaries that others insisted were impossible to cross. And he would tell them that sometimes the most important decisions we make are the ones that seem smallest in the moment. The simple choice to help someone in need, the refusal to look away from suffering just because it is inconvenient or dangerous. Those choices, he would say, define who we are more than any grand gesture or planned heroism ever could. If this story moved you, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear that courage often begins with simple compassion, that the lines we draw between us and them are often illusions, and that choosing honor over safety is never the wrong decision, even when it costs us everything we thought we needed. Leave a comment about what resonated most with you. Your support helps me continue creating stories about the choices that define our humanity. Thank you for being here. And remember that we all face moments when we must choose between what is easy and what is right. May we all have the courage to choose as Etienne did, to see beyond divisions, to shared humanity that connects us all. Until next time, stay compassionate, stay brave, and never underestimate the power of one act of kindness to change the course of history.